Hi, everybody. I thought I would go ahead and come in here by myself a couple minutes early just to say hello and welcome you guys. As soon as I see Adam, I will pull him in to join me. But thank you for being here. I hope you guys are doing well right now. You know, I'm sure there's a few professional organizers here in the group, and my current battle right now that I'm kind of trying to sort through is how do I go back to work and how do I do it safely? So if any of you guys can relate, you can leave it in the chat. I've been doing a lot of reading, trying to figure out how I do this safely, and also not have it backfire. So I hope you guys are doing well wherever you are. Let us know where you are, by the way, in the chat. And let me know if you can hear me. All last week, we were having some serious Wi-Fi issues, and that is why there was not an interview last week with all the kids here trying to do homeschool and the two of us working. We were having some challenges with Wi-Fi. So great, thanks for letting me know, Vanessa. Wi-Fi it's tough right now. I had an interview on Wednesday night with a local church, and the quality of my video, I was so embarrassed. Hey, there you are, Adam. I'll go ahead and pull you in. Let's see. Anyway, so that's why I did not have a interview last week, because I was worried if I did, then, it would just collapse on me. So, okay, let's see. Let me invite Adam to join me. So excited to have Adam back. So he will be here in a second, and I'm going to go ahead, see if we can get our Facebook feed to go live. Is Adam here yet? Looks like he's coming in.
There we go. Just a few more clicks.
Oh, there you are.
Does that look okay on your end?
Let me look. You look great.
Great. Thanks.
How are you?
I'm well. Happy to be here.
What's going on? Uh-oh. Busy week?
It has been a busy week, but I got to run in this morning. So my sisters, well, you and I talked, I have a sister out your way in California. I'm in Chicago.
Right.
My other sister's in Ohio. And our plan is we're all runners. So we're all going to run a virtual marathon this weekend and hope I don't get beat by both of my sisters.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to see if we can get this Facebook to go live for us.
And Joyce, I see your comment in the chat pod there, dialing in from Delafield. I've been up that way many times. I was actually supposed to be up there in a couple weeks for a 100-mile race in Kettle Moraine, but obviously it was canceled. So another time.
Oh. Okay, it looks like I may not be able to stream it. I don't know what's happening over here. So, okay, well, looks like Facebook is not going to cooperate today.
Okay.
It could be my Wi-Fi. We've been having I was saying before you hopped on, the reason I didn't have an organizing expert on last week is because we're having terrible Wi-Fi problems. It's not just us, it's a few people surrounding us as well. Everybody's working from home and homeschooling. Yeah. And so I think they're doing their best to get on top of it, but it could be a Wi-Fi issue, and that's why I can't get it to go live over here. But anyway, we'll figure that out in a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get started. We're 1 minute early, but we're going to go ahead and get going. So welcome back to
Thank you.
The Organizing Expert interview series. And yes, welcome, Adam. If you don't know who I am, I'm Samantha Pregenzer. I'm a professional organizer based in the Bay Area, and I'm the organizer behind the Simply Organized Instagram feed and the blog. And in my business, what I do is I work with families and stuff. You know, we declutter, we organize, I build systems, and a lot of what I do has, there's a bit of home improvement involved as well. And I'm also a field editor with Better Homes and Gardens. And the series came together right after the stay-at-home orders were implemented across the country. I was encouraging my online community to make the most of their time at home by decluttering or taking on little projects just to make the most of our time. And it didn't have to be just, organizing projects. We could also spend the time investing in ourselves by, taking online classes or finally digging in and figuring out how to start your own business. And while I was sharing ideas, I was receiving a lot of feedback and a lot of questions. And specifically when I talked about topics, around, for example, photo organizing, this is a great time to go through your photos on your phone or go through the photos that you have around the house. I was getting questions, of how do I get started and how do I do it right the first time? And I'm a member of NAPO, and I thought, why not reach out to my fellow, NAPO organizers who are experts in their own niche and their own field here and see if they would be interested in having conversations with me about their specific, area of expertise, their zone of genius, and bring them to you. So it has been much more popular than I thought it would have been. In week 1, we had 5 different experts and we had over 700 registered attendees, and that totally blew my mind. But as of today, we're at about 1,200. And my current plan is to keep these going, a new expert coming in each week to help, I want to expose them and put them out there, but also to help encourage you and motivate you and give you the confidence to know you can get started and you can do it right. And so I hope that you'll stick around with me. I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm still waiting to find out when our orders will officially be lifted. It looks like some businesses are going to start opening around here as of today, but it's going to be done in phases. So I'm not sure when I'm going to be actually back in homes doing the hands-on organizing, but until that happens, I'm happy to continue doing these interviews once a week. It's been really fun. And in case you have missed the previous interviews, they are all available for replay. There's been a lot of questions about the replay. All you have to do is go back to the original link where you viewed the live stream, and you can just click play on it. And what I think I'll do is I'll just put a full list together with links to each of the replays, and I'll put it on the blog so that everybody can just go to the blog and find them in one blog post. And then one other thing to mention, I know there's a lot of questions coming in. The last time Adam was with us, I'm going to get to that in a second, we had over 60 questions. So make sure that your question ends up in the bottom in the Ask a Question area, because we don't want to miss it in the chat feed on the side of the screen there. So I want to welcome back Adam Pratt of Chaos to Memories. Adam is a professional photo organizer, and he works with families to scan their photos, convert their home movies, and organize their digital photos. He lives in Chicago, as he mentioned, and he works with clients all across the country. And a couple weeks ago, Adam joined me, and we talked about organizing photos and the basics behind doing it right. And it was a hugely popular session. Again, we had over 60 questions, and many we did not get through. I think we got through like 30. And it was a 90-minute conversation. It could have kept going, but immediately following, I picked up the phone and I called Adam and I said, I can't believe, there were so many great questions, and I feel like we left so much on the table. And asked him if he would consider coming back and, taking a look through the questions and seeing was there one really hot topic that he could cover. And he, dug in, took a look around. He also had received emails from a few of you, and it looks like the topic that was popular was how to scan photos and do it right the first time. And as you know, organizing photos, it is tedious work. I don't know how, you probably don't know how I do the work I do. I don't know how you do the work that you do, because it seems like a really big job. So the last thing we want to do is repeat our effort, especially with photos, because there's so much and you want to do it right the first time. So I'm just so grateful that you're here to help us answer all of those questions today and share your expertise. And I can't thank you enough for coming back and joining us. It's just great to talk to you and see you.
Yeah. Thank you for the invitation. I just to throw a few things out there real quick off the bat. One is that with the clients that I work with, my typical client has 8,000 to 10,000 printed photos, prints or slides or a combination. So do the math on that a little bit. It's a lot of photos. They don't all need scanned, and we'll talk about that. But to your point about like doing this right the first time, nobody wants to do 8,000 of anything, even if they like doing it, and then go, oh, I did it wrong. I used the wrong equipment. I used the wrong resolution. I got the wrong file format. Let me just start over, right? That's like, oh, that's sickening to the stomach, right? So I think the idea of like doing it right the first time is really key.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking about you the other day because on Mother's Day, I know it's a day to give gifts to your mother, but I like to write a special note to each of my kids. And I like to add like little photos, like the day I became a mother to you. And so I was thinking about you because I have photos from over the years in like Shutterfly and Snapfish and all these random online sources. I was like, I need to hire Adam to help me pull all of this together. Yeah. So there's a lot, and they're spread out.
Yes. Yeah. So first step is always to gather, right? Like to have to go to 10 different places is a little crazy. So getting it together, and that's true of your physical photos too, and getting them scanned. Yeah. So Sam, I have a few slides that I want to start with. I know we'll have tons of questions, but can I start sharing my screen for that?
Yes, I'm going to make you.
Oh, I think I've got it here.
Because you're here with me, you can start your. There you go.
Yeah, I think if I switch over, let's see. I think I've got that right. Is that coming through?
I'm going to make it the focus screen. There we go.
Okay. Does that look good?
Yep, that looks great.
Awesome. So I've got a few slides. I'll try to make this quick because I know you guys have questions, but I thought it would be helpful to go through some slides first, just for context. So we've got a common understanding about, best practices for scanning, different options to consider, different price points, how to name your files. I tried to kind of preempt some of the questions that I knew we would get. The other thing that I'll say before I even start the slides is that I've really appreciated connecting with Sam recently, because even though we work in different realms, right? She's organizing your home and your kitchen and your closet and your garage, and I'm organizing your photos. I think we have at least two things in common. One is we love, without sounding too nerdy, like we love good systems, right? Like you don't want to do this just once. You want to do it and stay on top of it. So I think this session will give you a good system, right? A good framework for how to think about scanning your photos, something that's kind of durable and really works. And then the second thing that I think we share is a love of like teaching and helping. And so I'm just genuinely grateful to be a part of this session. It's fun to help you guys with these projects. They're crazy days. And if you can be productive at home, great. If you can't be productive, that's okay. You can be productive later, but hopefully it's helpful.
It's very helpful. And and what you just said is absolutely true. We have alignment on a lot of topics.
Yeah. So let me dive in, just a quick overview, and then we'll see what questions you guys have. The photo on my screen is a real client project. It was a small client project, but it's representative of the kinds of things that are probably in your home, whether they come from your lifetime and childhood or relatives or parents and grandparents. but we tend to have a lot of prints and negatives and maybe slides. They tend to be in a lot of different formats. And so there's a lot of variables here. So the first thing that before we even talk about the scanning process, I think it's helpful to think about why we would do this project at all, because it can be a lot of time, it can cost a lot of money, and if you don't have a clear sense of motivation of why, then you might never get started, or even if you start, you might not finish, right? Having that end goal in mind is important. So I think we should think about scanning our photos and preserving them for 3 reasons. The first is preservation. Photos don't last forever, especially ones in like old sticky albums and stuff that are fading and turning yellow and turning brittle. They're not going to last forever. And if we scan them and take care of those backups, we can preserve them not just for our lifetime, but literally for generations. So preservation is one key motivation. Another one is the ability to search. When your photos are in boxes or in the basement or the attic or both the basement and the attic or where you don't even not really even sure where, it's really hard to search those photos. But if you get them digitized or scanned, and then you can apply some basic tags or keywords so you know people, places, events, dates, things like that, it is possible then to search your photos in an instant, right? It's a graduation coming up. It's a wedding, it's an anniversary, it's a memorial service, whatever it is. The ability to find your photos quickly is really helpful. And when they're all still in boxes and binders, that's pretty hard to do. The third motivation that I want to call out is just sharing. Photos, I think by their nature, are meant to be shared. We want to remember and then share those and remember experiences with other people, friends, family, grandparents, you name it, grandkids on the other end. So I just wanted to start there. Preserving, searching, sharing, I think are the 3 motivations. And think about what's most important to you and hold on to that as we get into this project. So before we talk about different scanners, I just wanted to show you a couple of comparisons. And these are real comparisons. I'm not making anything up. This is real stuff from real projects. Some of them my own. Wow. And it illustrates how you can do this poorly or you can do this well. And I want you to be successful with it again, so you only do it once. So this is a photo I took in the summer of 1989 in Yosemite National Park. If you know the park, this is in Tuolumne Meadows. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And it's not even a great photo, but it's a good memory of the park. On the left is a flatbed. Actually, I'll click through this and kind of reveal the secrets here. On the left is, I scanned the print with a flatbed scanner. Again, it's like decades old. It's a little faded. It's a little weathered, a little yellowed and stuff. On the right is the source here is a negative, the same negative for that print. And I scan this with a DSLR camera scan, very high-end digital capture. And so obviously there's 3 differences. If you can't see them all, obviously the color is different. I scaled them up a little bit just for illustrative purposes because the resolution of the one on the right is much higher. And you may even notice that there's actually more photo on the right. Like you see the rocks down below, because I scanned the negative, I can actually get more of it that wasn't even there in the print. Even when I had this developed in 1989, I never even saw the whole photo. So the scanning you do can give different results, and wanting to get the best result up front, I think, is important. The next example, this one's from a client of mine that gave me permission to share this example. On the left, so the original format is a slide, right? You may not have a lot of those. They may belong to your dad or your uncle or a family member, but this was from a slide, and the client was trying to do a little DIY action. And I love DIY, but this one didn't work out real well. What they did was they put the slide in an old projector. It worked. That was a shock, but it did work. The lamp turned on, and then they hung a sheet in the basement, and you can see some of the waviness, and then they projected it, and then they took pictures with their iPhone. And it's better than nothing, but then on the right is what I was able to capture. And to be honest, it's not even the best photograph. It's pretty dark, like on the right side in his face. Even the original wasn't that well exposed. But needless to say, the results are way better. Like, you can see his face and the water's blue.
What a difference.
Yeah. So just a few comparisons that all scanning is not created equal. And if you do this, you want to do it well. So before I get into scanners, Sam, any questions bubbling up in the pod that we should hit on now?
I was just kind of, cruising over them a little bit. I think we're good for you to move on.
Okay, great. Yeah. So let's talk about resolution. This is normally one of the first questions everybody asks. So I'll kind of go through the basics, and this isn't going to be too technical. You'll be able to hold on to these ideas.
Right.
But basically there's two categories. So there's prints, right? Prints, things in frames, maybe even documents sometimes. The ideal resolution for a print would be 600 PPI. If you scan something at 300 PPI, that allows you to reproduce it at the same size. So you could reproduce, reprint a 4x6 print at 4x6, and maybe that's fine. I like scanning at 600 PPI because it's going to capture all the quality of the image that's there. And if I would ever want to scale it up, either for a larger print or to frame it or to put it in a slideshow that I would present like on a nice big TV or something like that, I like the extra resolution. The other category generally is photos that we see through, right? Like slides or negatives. And my goal there is to always scan those at 4,000 PPI. And you may say, holy cow, that's really high. Like, why the difference? Well, if you think about it, these are not to scale, right? These are for illustrative purposes. A 35 millimeter negative or a slide is actually pretty tiny, right? It's like, maybe I have a big thumb, but it's about the size of my thumb. It's pretty small. And so because of the smallness, we want to get high resolution to get everything we can out of that. And again, be able to do large prints, creative projects, things like that with them. So those are the two recommendations for resolution. And then there's one caution. You may say, well, hey, Adam says 600 PPI is good for prints. Well, if 600 PPI is better than 300 PPI, then 1200 must be even better. But there are limits. So I would say these numbers are not only ideal, but they're really the upper limits, because if you scan at even higher resolution, and it is possible, it will take you a lot longer. Your files will be much larger, and they probably won't have any more quality to them, right? There are limits of the physical media where you can, we've all seen shows where they say like enhance, like in the crime scene lab where they say enhance with Photoshop. You can only do so much, right? That's science fiction. You can only do so much, and these would really be the upper limits. I think these are good goals, but I wouldn't waste time going any higher.
That's great. Yeah, I had seen that the resolution, that was a big question that was coming through.
Yep. So the next thing, I don't have a slide to talk about this, but let me just mention one other thing generally before we talk about scanner models.
Okay.
You don't have to scan everything. There's generally like kind of three categories. Some people say, okay, there's the photos that I want to scan. They're really important to me. I want to scan them. Some photos I want to keep, but I don't want to scan. And then some photos are just duds. They're just blurry. They're no good. I don't know why I kept them, much less paid for double prints, whatever it was. It's okay to toss photos, right? I'm giving you permission. If it's a bad photo or if it's not important, or you don't even know who's in it, go ahead and throw it away. That's okay. One of the pieces of bad news about photos is most of them can't be recycled. They're not like real paper per se. You could check with your local recycling facilities, but normally they can't be recycled. You just toss them or shred them. But you do have permission to throw stuff away that's not good or not important. But I would say if they are important to you, go ahead and scan them or have them scanned and preserve them for now and for the future.
Okay.
So I'm gonna hit you with a couple of options quickly, and these are just going to be some different candidates.
Everybody loves to know about new phone apps.
Yeah. So let's start there. The phone apps, these tend to be free or inexpensive. And I love my iPhone, right? I'm not going to dog on any phones or anything. I love my iPhone, but it is not a good scanner. Despite all the marketing, they just don't work that well. The best iPhone or smartphone is not even as good as, like an average camera from years ago, despite the marketing, right? So these are inexpensive. You already got a phone, most of us. The apps are free to cheap, but the quality's not great, and they do fail on odd formats. Like you could get away with a print, but if you had a slide or a negative, it's just not going to work very well, if at all. So generally, again, this would be better than nothing, but I would advise to skip the phone apps. They're really tedious, and you're not going to get great results. Jumping up another category is what I call the gadget scanners. You've probably seen stuff like this on Amazon, in catalogs, things like that. They're generally about $100. Interestingly enough, I see a lot of these at like Goodwill stores and Salvation Army and stuff. I don't think that's a good sign. If it was valuable, they would have kept it. So these are pretty cheap, and again, pretty low quality, pretty low resolution. I don't think it's worth it. If you're happy with it, don't let me stop you, but I would not encourage, to invest in one of these. Bumping up from there, a little bit more expensive, kind of the $200 price range generally, is kind of these all-in-one office devices. And you may have one of these for your home business or something like that. It's kind of a printer, scanner, copier, fax, whatever. The problem here is for photos, you've got two real downers. It's just going to be slow. It's not a high-speed scanner. It's not fast. And the quality's not great. A lot of times the resolution might be only 300 ppi. Even if it is higher, generally they're not great at photos. These are really built for documents, right? And like in a home office, but they're not going to be great. It's going to be a really slow process. Again, better than nothing, but it wouldn't be where I would spend my money. So with all those downers, let's get into some stuff that, if I disqualify those, here's some stuff that I do think is some better options. You've got some high-speed scanners. These are more expensive. They're typically selling on Amazon like between $500 and $600. This one happens to be from Epson. It's called their Fast Photo series. What's cool about these is they're pretty fast. You can scan a couple hundred photos an hour. The quality is pretty like average to good. Like it's not as good as I'm doing with professional equipment, but for home use, it's pretty solid. The two downsides to these devices, I don't want you to be surprised. I don't want you to go buy one and be like, oh, Adam didn't tell me about this. One catch is it's limited to standard prints. That should be obvious, but if you've got something oversized, or if you've got slides or negatives or other formats, or maybe you've got stuff that's like old from, relatives that's like on the rigid boards and things like that, it's not going to go through here. So kind of standard prints, standard sizes. And I wrote temperamental. I don't know if that's the best phrase, but the way they work, they can get dirty and dusty from old photos, and they can streak. So you got to clean them a lot and open them up and brush them out and things like that. It's not rocket science, but it takes a little care and feeding to make sure it keeps running smoothly. So a couple more categories. The flatbed scanner, this is the most familiar. When most of us think of a scanner, this is what we think. From these, you're going to get good quality. You can get multiple formats from these. So you can do slides, negatives, and prints from the same device. The downside is this is going to be slow. Like the high-speed scanner I showed a minute ago, it's going to be way faster. This is going to be slow. You're going to be, if you're super productive and really good at this, you're going to be lucky to do like 600 photos an hour. I'm sorry, not 600, 60. Lucky to do 60 an hour, probably less. The price point varies, and it's pretty affordable. You can get a decent flatbed scanner for $200 that'll do slides, negatives, and prints like the Epson series. They have the V600 that's pretty nice. You can spend more. The twist here is you could spend like $1,000 on a nicer scanner. It'll be higher resolution, higher quality. The downside is they tend to be slower. So you've got some math to do there. Do I want to spend more quality, but it's slower? Like those are some of the trade-offs. I think I've just got two last options, and then we'll kind of wrap up this section. So one other option, if you have a lot of film, there are film scanners out there. whether it's your collection or a relative's collection, maybe there's binders full of slides and negatives and things like that. Film scanners are really high quality. They're just incredible. Limited formats. It's probably going to only do like 35 millimeter film or maybe medium format. These can be pretty slow. These can take a couple minutes per slide or piece of film, maybe 3 or 4 minutes a piece. So super slow, but great quality. And your price range is generally like $400 to $1,200. Again, if you like this, you're probably going to have to also buy a flatbed scanner to go with it. So you've got something for prints, but those are your options. The last two, this is my favorite. This is what I use. I just want to give this as an example. This is not accessible to most people because of the kind of complexity and the cost, but I actually do all my camera scanning with high-end digital cameras in a professional studio setup. This is what a lot of like museums and archives and libraries have adopted. It's high quality, it's high resolution, it's really high speed. You can do any format, like any size, any weird stuff somebody shot, it doesn't matter. The downside is it's a big investment in equipment. Like my rig's about $8,000, right? Most people are not going to set this up. And there's a lot of technical skill. So it's not like you just get it out of the box from Amazon, press a button, and it shows up on your screen. There's more learning involved, but it's another option. And if you think this is crazy, there's also drum scanners. And I put this out there not because any of us are going to buy one, but because this is the really kind of the highest end option. It's great quality, super expensive, super slow, unrealistic. And I've worked with this equipment. It's about the size of a refrigerator, and it costs the price of a nice car. Like 10 grand is cheap. You can go 60K or more. And even if you don't buy this equipment, you want to have it done professionally. A cheap drum scan would be $50. That's one image. And you could spend as much as $500 on one scan. And again, you're not going to use that for your home photos, but a high-end artist or photographer might do that. But I just wanted to end there to kind of give you the spectrum, and then end with a couple like practical recommendations. One thing to think about is what formats do you have? So inventory what you've got. If it's mostly prints, then maybe one of those high-speed scanners is good. If you've got more peculiar stuff like this, like large format negatives or stereo slides or personal ViewMaster reels or really old rigid things, like you're gonna have to figure those out a little bit differently. But let me just end with some recommendations. If you've got kind of a smaller collection, multiple formats like slides and negatives and prints, and you've got lots of time, then something like an Epson flatbed, like the V600 is only about $200. It does a good job. It'll take you a while to work through those, but again, you don't have to scan everything. A different scenario is maybe you've got a large collection, mostly prints, and that's what most of us do have, and you've got a bigger budget to spend on equipment, then something like the Epson Fast Photo series could be a good option. Again, it's costs more, but you're going to be able to get through the project a ton faster. And then maybe you split the cost with your sister or sell it on Facebook Marketplace or something when you're done the bulk of the project. That's an option. Then the third scenario that I mentioned is if your collection has a lot of different formats and you want the highest quality and you've got a bigger budget to spend, and you look at a box like this and you like pull your hair out and you're like, I love the idea of having this scanned, but I really don't want to do it. This just sounds really tedious. Then you might think about outsourcing it, right? You might find somebody you trust to do the scanning for you. Scanning's, I love it, but it's not everybody the idea of a good time. This will, depending on the size of your collection, this could be a bigger investment. But if you don't want to spend hours a week for months on end doing really tedious stuff, this might be an option for you. So that's where I wanted to end in terms of presenting ideas. I'll leave that up there for a minute, let people absorb that, screenshot it, whatever. And again, these are not the only options, right? You may say, oh, I've got this and I really like it. That's cool. There's tons of options out there, but I thought this might be a helpful kind of starting point just for some recommendations to think about how to approach it. Any questions on that?
It is. That's great. No, I think that's great.
Okay. Sam,
this is incredible information.
I forgot I had this slide. Let me mention file names briefly. because I know we already had some questions about this.
Well, so, I'm glad that you're sharing this. Yeah, I was going to say, as I was looking through the questions, there are quite a few about how to name your files.
Perfect. So when I'm scanning, just to be clear, when I'm scanning, I don't do anything special, right? I would just say like Pratt 001, Pratt 002, like my last name, right? Scan 0001. I don't really worry about it at that point, just for the sake of speed. I just let the software do what it does, right? When I'm done, though, I do want to rename my files in an intelligent way. And I don't do this on every file, right? I told you my average client has 8,000 to 10,000 printed photos. I don't mind tedious work, but even I wouldn't want to do that. And my clients wouldn't want to pay for it. So I use software to do batch renaming. And this is the file renaming pattern I use, and I'll kind of break it down and explain it. So the first thing I do is the date. And I always do year, month, date. Most of us are used to writing day, month, year, but that gets really screwy if I want to have like a bunch of Christmases together. They're all 12/25, right? And that gets crazy. So always start with a year, and that way everything will sort chronologically. Then I put the subject, and the subject is like the event, right? Like I don't put everybody's name in here. If there were 5 people, I don't put everybody's name. I say picnic, graduation, holiday, something like that. And then I use a unique, what we call like a sequence number. You know, if they were all Christmas 95, but I have 10 photos from that day, they can't all have that name because they would conflict, right? So I have to have like 001, 002, 003, just to distinguish them. So I really like this. I've been using this for decades. And what this means is if you use a file name scheme like this, every name is unique. So you don't have to worry about duplicates and being confused. Everything gets chronologically sorted, even if it all gets jumbled up, it still makes sense. And the files are also self-explanatory. So whether it's you or your kids or your grandkids or a relative or somebody you email, even without opening the file, they have a sense of what this is going to be without opening a bunch of images. So I think that's a really good naming scheme that you could think about as well. It'd be worth screenshotting that one and taking that one home. And that's it for slides. I hope that didn't take long, but hopefully it was helpful to think through those options. And then I would love to see, Sam, what questions you've got and what questions we have from our guests.
Yeah, well, I went ahead and you're basically answering this one question here that I was looking at. It doesn't matter. The name of the scan isn't going to matter if it ends up on an external hard drive. It's going to be the same thing, right?
Yeah.
What you just described, how you name your files.
Yeah, I think the naming just makes them unique and kind of sensible. But that's actually naming the file. That's not anything in the file. So if you make a copy of that, back it up, share it, it'll have the same file name.
Okay. Yeah. That's great. Well, we can get started with the other questions too. I mean, you've covered most of what, I was wondering, especially when it came to actual equipment. But so thank you for sharing that. But I think I'd rather focus on their questions.
Yeah.
So it looks like, in line with how to name, she's wanting to know when and how to name scanned photos. For example, first, assuming we have a large volume of photos, do you organize, assign names to the physical photos first, or just get them scanned first and then organize? So that's her first question. Yeah. And I'll follow up with the second one when you're done.
Yeah, good question. So I scan my own photos, but I'm also doing client work. And with that comes a sense of responsibility. I feel a little anxious. Like I have 80 years of this client's family photos. I want to get those scanned as quickly as possible. So I don't spend a lot of time pre-sorting or naming or anything like that. My priority, I get them scanned. So even if something terrible were to happen, I'd have them all safe. I'd have them backed up. So I really focus on the naming after I get them scanned.
So then are you starting by, you have just that one little group? Like, for example, if it was Christmas 1995, then you are just Christmas 1995. You're scanning all of those and then going back when you're done with that group? Or you're not doing multiple groups at once, are you?
No, actually, yeah, my habit, it's one way or the other, but my habit is I do all the batches, right? Sometimes you get just a mess of stuff, but normally there's some organization to it. They're in the drugstore envelopes, they're in albums, there's some kind of organization. And I have a system where I scan those batches and I put each batch like in a folder. And then later I'll match up the physical photos and the scanned photos and like sort out the dates and things like that. But generally, I just try to get them scanned as quickly as possible.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. Her second question is, do we custom name each one by one or wait and do a batch naming?
Yeah, I would definitely batch rename afterwards. The one at a time would just be way too slow. Yeah, I wouldn't have the patience for it. So I would just do it in batch for each batch, like I showed with that Christmas example.
Okay. And then finally, what about if you don't know the date, the place, the people, but you still want to scan them? How would you name those?
Yeah, so great question. There's normally some ambiguity, right? Like I like being precise, but sometimes your detective work only takes you so far. So two things that I would do is, let's say you have a photo from summer of 75. That's as close as you can guess. So I might I might date that like 1975-06 for June -00. I know that's an impossible date. There is no June 0, right? But it shows me that I think this is the summer of 75 and it's good enough. It's kind of like a circa date. The other thing that I would do if you don't know the subject, miscellaneous or miss, M-I-S-C, that's a pretty good subject. Like, I like knowing for sure, but miscellaneous is okay.
Okay. That's awesome. Let's see. Some of these, again, because you may have already answered these, can you scan more than one at a time? And I know you kind of touched on that with the different pieces of equipment. But can you scan more than one at a time and then crop, or does that change the quality?
Yeah, it depends on how you're scanning, what kind of equipment you're using, but like a flatbed scanner may have an option where you could lay down like 4 photos and it'll scan them and crop them for you automatically. My general recommendation would be do some tests, but normally I just scan one at a time because the time it takes to like crop and rotate and straighten all of those individual images normally takes longer than it would be for me to just swap a new photo.
Okay, that's great. How about, is the scan affected based on the size of the photo? For example, if it's a wallet versus an 8x10 or something in between, which one would you, if you had access to all those, one photo in all of those various sizes, which one would you choose to scan?
Yeah, super smart question, and this is like maybe a little bit of a surprise answer. I wish I had a slide to illustrate this, but imagine what we probably all have, which is school photo packages, right? You get some wallets, you get a 5x7, you get an 8x10. In that case, which one do we scan? Well, the bigger the photo, the bigger the printed photo, the higher resolution we can scan that photo, which may make you think, well, according to that logic, I'll scan the 8x10 because that one's the biggest. However, there's a catch. The aspect ratio, I don't know if I can explain this well with my hands on a webcam, but the aspect ratio of an 8x10 photo is actually some of the original image is cut off. So if you compare the 5x7 with the 8x10, there's actually like more image in the 5x7. And so because of that, a 5x7 of those options, like a 4x6 or a 5x7 is probably the best one to scan if you want kind of maximum image area. 8x10 would be best if you want maximum resolution, but you could live with some of it getting cropped off.
Okay. That's great.
Hopefully that makes sense. That's a little bit of a math
problem. Let's see. Right. We've already answered this one on scanners at different price points. Do you feel that you could add more onto that, or do you think you sort of adequately kind of covered that in the slide?
I think that's the general spread. You can do some research, and again, think about the math. There's really some math to do between, do I want to buy a scanner, learn how to use it, and it's not rocket science, but learn how to use it, learn how to do it right, and get the right resolution and color and all that stuff, or do I not want to spend the money on the equipment and what could be a ton of time and maybe just have it done for me, right? That's the real calculation. So think about scanners and think about, does it make sense for somebody to help me?
That's a great point. Okay, let's see. My scanner says
So I think
Are you there?
I am. The audio cut out there
for a minute. Did you lose me for a sec?
Yeah, can you hit me with that one more time?
Yeah, sure. It says, Joyce was asking about her scanner. It says DPI, not PPI. Is that the same?
Yeah, good question. So practically speaking, it is the same thing. I try to be technically accurate, and without getting too technical, DPI actually is only when you print things. PPI is when you scan things. They're related, but a little bit different. A lot of software kind of confuses those a little bit and says DPI, but it's the same thing.
Got it. Great. Okay, let's see. What do people usually do with their photos after the scanning is complete? There are still so many to store. I'm tempted to toss some, but that's scary.
Yeah, I understand that concern. Again, you have permission to toss. If they're not valuable, you can let them go. The other option, without driving you crazy, is you could also share them, right? If you have relatives, cousins, aunts, and uncles that maybe they would, appreciate having them, you could do that. The other thing that I would say is, in relation to this question, and I'm also seeing something just in the chat pod about what do I do with them after you scan them? I do encourage people to keep them. They are, in a way, a good backup. But when I'm done with a scanning project and I take all those photos, I've discarded the bad ones, I've discarded the duplicates, and then I've taken all the remaining photos that we scanned and put them in archival storage that, fits the right size of media, slide boxes for slides and envelopes for prints and things like that. Typically, what I give back to a client takes up half the space that it did when it came to me. So it still takes up space. And I'm a minimalist. I like my place empty, but it is nice that it can take up less space in your home when it's all done.
Absolutely. And we talked a little bit about that in the other, session on organizing photos. So that's a good one to go back and review too. Okay, let's see. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is just kind of cover, since we're talking about scanning, I'm going to stick to those questions for now, and then we can go back and look and see if there's others, because I'm noticing there are other questions that not fully related to scanning. How do you scan newspaper articles?
Yeah, so newspaper is tricky. It's easy to scan, but it's some of the worst paper. So it doesn't, if you leave the newspaper out on the driveway in the morning and don't pick it up till dinner, it's already yellow, right? And we're not even talking about storing it for years. That happens in a day. So newspaper is not very high quality. It can get brittle. And so the best thing to do with newspaper is to store it flat if you can. Don't even fold it. And then when it comes to scanning it, one of the best tricks is to put something black on behind it, like a piece of mat board or foam board from a craft store. And that will minimize seeing text from the other side. That's a real problem when you scan.
That's a great tip.
Yep.
That's awesome. How about any tips for faster scanning on a flatbed?
Nope. It's just
Sometimes you just got to muscle through it.
It's just tedious. Yep, it's just slow. No tricks.
Yeah. Right. Okay, let's see. How about thoughts on scanning all the savable photos versus just the really good ones?
Yeah, so it's a good question. They're your photos, so you have to make the decision. I tend to put things in just two categories. Either get rid of it or keep it and scan it. Like if I'm going to keep it, I'm going to scan it. That's my approach. Because if you change your mind and in 5 years, assuming that nothing bad has happened to it, the thought of going back and rescanning just some of them, it'll take more time than just doing them all at the beginning.
That is true. That is very true. Let's see. How about scan raw or scan with features from scanner or app?
Yeah, so I think raw can mean a couple different things. I suspect this person means like use the kind of the default settings off of the scanner or use some of the more professional or advanced settings. It's hard for me to make a recommendation there. My general advice would be to experiment, right? Just do some tests, use the different settings, see what you like. Maybe connect with an expert who you would trust to give you some advice about it. But I think at the beginning, do some experimenting, and that's part of like the do it right. Like seriously, take a day to scan your first 5. Do it 5 different ways, do it different resolutions, do all this different stuff and get it right, because you don't want to do it almost right like 1,000 times and then redo it. So do your testing and experiments up front.
Okay, great. Let's see. Here's a question from Carmen. If I am organizing a scanned collection of photos chronologically in folders, do I keep the sequential numbering when I rename the photos intact across all the year folders? Or do I restart the sequence for each year folder?
Yeah, good question. So I would say my answer to that would be to go back to the naming scheme that I mentioned earlier, and use that. So, if you just have a bunch of photos from a certain year, like 2018, then and you're not doing real specific names, just do them 2018, 001, 002, and then start over that sequence number again for 2019 and so on.
Perfect. Okay, I know that you said there are not really many apps that are great for doing this, but are there any scanning apps that do a decent job?
I don't think so. Some are better than others, right? They're not all the same. I don't think they're all equally bad. But I'm not impressed with any of them. Yeah. And here's the trick, that just to be clear, the challenge of a scanning project, it's not actually the scanning. The hardest part of the scanning project, a big scanning project, is working with all the media, finding all the boxes, getting it all staged, getting it out of envelopes, scanning it, putting it back. The scanning is actually not the bulk of the time. So if you're going to spend all the time managing all the physical stuff, I would say even use a $200 scanner. Like do that much and you're going to have so much better results if you've already spent all the time to handle the material.
Great answer. Okay. If I have wedding photos that I would like to enlarge later, is it better to scan at 600 PPI for the photos and 4,000 PPI for the negatives?
Yes, definitely. That's what I would advise. And to expand on that a little bit and reference one of the other questions I saw, if you only have prints, scan the prints, right? If that's all you've got, that's what you've got. If you have negatives and prints, I would always scan the negative. And we saw that in that first example of that photograph in Yosemite Park. One was a negative, one was a print. You'll almost always get higher resolution, high quality, and better color off the negative if you have it.
Okay, let's see. We have some good scan questions here. Can Epson V600 scan at 600 ppm for photos? What is the highest for slides?
Yeah, so I've used the Epson V600. I think its highest resolution for slides is like 4800 ppi. So it's within the kind of the range of recommended resolution. So again, it's not the best scanner in the world, but it's pretty solid for $220. It's pretty good stuff.
Okay. How about suggestions for scanning a large print bigger than a flatbed scanner?
Yeah, so you've got kind of two practical options here. This is actually one of the reasons I like the camera scanning workflow that I use, because I can scan really large things. I can scan posters. I can scan. There was something about diplomas in the 1930s that were like 3 feet long, so I can scan that big stuff, and it's okay. So you either camera scan it if you have somebody who can do that for you, or you could also do it on a flatbed, but in pieces. So you do a section, slide it over, do another section, and then you'd have to use some software to stitch it back together. But that's kind of the old school way that we used to do it.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. How about from Sandy? I'm scanning photos from past generations. How can I tag the photos or put names of people in the photo?
Yeah, great question. So after you've got it scanned, that's an important question. Okay, so I got all this scanned. If I take a bunch of photo chaos and get it scanned, I just have a bunch of digital chaos. Like,
yeah.
Right? Where does that get me? So you're getting to the next phase. You have to scan it first. That's where you start. But on the organizing side, you can absolutely tag photos with events. You can correct the dates as much as you know them, and you can tag people's faces, and that allows you to search them. I do all of that with Adobe Lightroom Classic because it uses industry standards to add those tags inside the files. It's not tied to Apple or Google or Mac or PC or anything like that. So that's what I would do next, and that's what I do on every client project.
Okay, great. Let's see. How do you select DPI of 4000 when camera scanning?
Yeah, great question. So without getting crazy technical, it would take a little bit to explain, but basically I'm using a high enough quality digital SLR. Like my camera is about 51 megapixels. Most people don't own a camera like that, much less know that they exist, but it's a very high resolution camera that I just know the boundaries of that sensor, and I know that it'll accommodate the media. So I'm not choosing 4000. I know I'm just getting at least that.
Great. Does the amount of white around a picture affect the scan? Should I crop to just the image before it is scanned and saved?
It's a super smart question, Kay. It should not affect the quality, but it will affect the speed. So if you have a mounted photo or something with a bunch of white mat board around it, don't waste time scanning the mat board if you're not interested. If you just want the picture, do the preview and crop in, and then when it scans it, it'll just do that smaller area. It'll just take less time.
Yeah, that's great. That was recently, and I guess I think it still is kind of a cool, unique option that we have with photos. Like when you print them out in the Instagram size, they generally will have a white border.
Yep, very retro.
Around them, they're square shaped.
Right.
So yeah, very retro. So I can see how that would be, a question, because we're all kind of printing those now.
Yep.
Let's see here. I'm looking for the questions about scanning, because I know we've covered some of these other ones previously, so I want to make sure we hit.
Can I hit one here from Henrietta?
Yeah. So why don't you?
I'm seeing one here in the question pod. Henrietta asks, can you compare to have photos scanned at Staples or like a similar store? Would that be cheaper than buying a scanner? I don't know for sure, but my hunch would be it probably wouldn't be it may or may not be cheaper than buying a scanner, but if I was going to outsource it, I would go to a professional who specializes in scanning photos. Most of what they're going to do at Staples is like copying documents and things like that. They're not going to really have the equipment to do a good job with photographs. So I would look more for a specialist than like an office supply store would be my advice there.
Okay, that's great. Let's see. What about wiping the dust off of your pictures before running through? Is there a standard way to do that?
There is. That's a great question. So I'm actually I'm developing a new course about camera scanning, not just general scanning, but just about professional camera scanning. And I've got a whole section dedicated to cleaning. And the little line I put in there is just like they say, an ounce of prevention, is worth more than a pound of cure. I would say like a minute of cleaning photos is worth like an hour of retouching later, right? So
right, yeah.
If you have film, like if it's slides or negatives that are dirty, you can get film cleaner, like from Amazon or from a local camera shop, that you can actually physically clean it with a solution that's safe for film. And then for photos, I would just use I have it right here on in my office here. I just use a gentle microfiber cloth to brush away the dust and stuff. And I also have some anti-static brushes that you could get from a camera shop just to keep not only your photos, but also your equipment clean. And that'll help a ton.
Oh, yeah, that's great. How about recommendations for scanning scrapbook pages that are 12 by 12?
Yes, 12 by 12 scrapbook pages. I do a lot of those. They're some of the most challenging because they're large and because oftentimes they're a little 3D, right? They're not just photos, but sometimes it's multiple layers of cardboard and embellishments and things like that. So they can be scanned. And you'd either need like a large scanner, like Epson makes some large art format scanners that are like really big and really expensive. They're like $3,000 or $4,000. So you need either a big scanner or a camera scanner like I use, or if you have a conventional scanner, you can do that, but you'll just have to do it like in 4 quadrants and stitch it together. So possible, but just a little bit more work because of the size of it.
Okay, great. Yeah, that is probably something that you see a lot of because that was another thing that was really hot for a while.
Yep.
Do you take on a lot of those projects?
I do a lot of scrapbook kind of reclamation of sorts, but it's kind of fun because you can take those books, which are a labor of love and they're full of great memories, but they weigh like 20 pounds, right? So I can get those scanned, preserved, and then if there's lots of kids in there, like if you only have the one physical one, like who gets it when they move out of the house, right? If you preserve it, and then you can even reprint it like a digital, like a fresh, small, lightweight version, then everybody can have a copy, right? You print it for $50 and everybody gets a copy. And maybe mom keeps the big, massive original, but it's a nice way to preserve and share it.
So what does it look like when you scan it when it has all those embellishments?
Yeah.
Does it come out looking more flat or does it have some dimension?
Yeah, we light it in a special way so that we have light coming from all angles. You don't want light just straight on. It would cause weird shadows and look it wouldn't even look 3D. It would just look not great. So we try to light it from multiple angles. It's not 3D per se, but it's kind of the best straight on rendition that you could get of it. And just trying to preserve what's there.
Got it. Yeah, that's interesting. You must see some great scrapbook pages. A lot of memories, special notes are written in those. So
yeah, for sure.
Those are extra special. It's not just a photo. You're actually getting the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. This
what lens do you recommend
but it is.
using
It's about
for
the story
camera
too.
scanning?
I'm sorry. I was talking too much. Can you ask that one again, Sam?
Right. No, is there a lag on my...
There is some lag, and I'm not sure where it is, but I think I caught up with you.
Okay, cool. What lens do you recommend using for camera scanning?
Yeah. So there are different manufacturers. There's Nikon and Canon and Sony and all of that stuff. Here's the criteria you're looking for. You want a macro lens that does 1-to-1 magnification. And if you're not familiar with that, it's basically a lens for like close-up work. So it'll look like original size. And the general length, you want it between, my recommendation is about 50 to 100. You don't want a wide angle lens because that'll distort things. And you don't want a really long lens because you have to put your camera too far away from your photos. So I happen to use a Canon 100 millimeter macro. I have a couple of them actually. But those are the parameters I'd be looking for.
Okay, great. Let's see. We still have 23 questions. You know, this topic of organizing it's everybody wants to do it right the first time.
Yep.
Let's see. So I think I've gone through most of the questions. I just want to make sure we can ask this one, you know, how to prepare. I know we already talked about dusting and cleaning, but how do you prepare them before scanning? Mm-hmm. Is there any other tips that you might have on that?
Yeah. So 2 pieces of advice that will really, really help you have a more efficient project. The first piece of advice is to try to store like media together. So if you have a bunch of 35 millimeter slides, put all the slides together, scan those together. If you've got 4x6 prints, scan those together. If you've got 8x10 prints, scan those together. You want to be cautious about disrupting the order. Like you don't want to mess up the sequence and the dates and lose track of that. But if you can scan like material together, that will help. And then the other thing is, in addition to scanning like material, just having them cleaned, dusting them off, brushing them with a hand brush, or you can get a little hand blower. It almost looks like a little like a bulb syringe, but it blows air and can dislodge dust and things from that. The other thing, in case this isn't obvious, is when you're scanning, wear gloves, whether they're like cloth inspection gloves or like nitrile rubber gloves, which I know are a little bit hard to find right now, but if you can get a pair, you don't want to touch photographic material with your bare hands, because even if you're super clean, I know we're all washing our hands, but even if you're super clean, there's still some natural oils on our hands that could damage those photos and leave fingerprints.
Yes, that is a good point. That is a good point. How large a photo can you scan on a dedicated photo scanner? I'm thinking about old photos that I have that are mounted on a mat board.
Yeah, so great question. The size of what you can scan is going to be constrained by the scanner, right? Like if it only goes up to 10x13 or something like that, that would be a pretty typical size. Then a big rigid piece like that, that's the biggest that you're going to be able to scan. That's one of the reasons that I like camera scanning. And if you have large things, like odd or large things, you could do like almost all of it yourself. But then you might want to find somebody to help you with like the odd sizes, scrolls or posters or just different kind of peculiar thing. Maybe large framed things that you can't take out of the frame. You might want help on some of those odd ones.
Okay. Jody was asking, as far as scanners, she noticed that you mentioned only the brand Epson. And have you compared to other brands? And if not, in order to look at other scanners, what should we be looking for in a flatbed or a fast photo type equipment?
Yeah, good question. So I did mention Epson, not as like my favorite or anything. They happen to make nice scanners. I also own and use Canon scanners. I've used scanners from a lot of different companies, Minolta, Nikon, all sorts. The scanning technology is pretty mature, and honestly, it hasn't really changed in about 20 years. So none of them are really bad scanners. I would say that the things you're looking for are, does it support the formats that I need to scan, right? If it's just prints, that's simpler. If you have negatives and slides, that's a little bit more complicated. So does the scanner support the formats you want? And does it support the kind of resolution that I was talking about? 600 ppi for prints, hopefully close to 4,000 ppi for slides and negatives. And then, just read some online reviews and see if it seems like a good fit. And you can afford it.
Okay. Right. Can you compare having photos scanned at Staples or similar? And, would something like that be cheaper than buying a scanner? And I guess also my question would be about the quality if you were going to go there.
Yeah. I think that was the same one we answered before. And I would say generally the guidance would be they're going to be set up better for like office documents and copying and things like that. If I was going to spend money to have it done, I would spend it with a specialist, not like an office supply store. I don't think they would. I love my local Staples store, but I wouldn't use them for this.
Right. Okay. I think we've covered most of the scanning questions. I don't know if you want to scroll through and see a lot of them, for example, the batch renaming, we kind of covered that in the first session. But if there's any easy questions that you want to touch on.
I see 2 or 3 maybe I can address just briefly. One person was asking about file formats. So when I scan, I'm doing camera scanning, so I capture everything in camera raw, which is kind of like the original capture. If I'm scanning with a more conventional, like a flatbed scanner or something, and I think I'll do a lot of retouching or correction, then I would use TIFF file format for that. If I'm just doing simple scanning and I don't expect to do a lot of editing, JPEG is fine. Almost everything I deliver to clients is JPEG, and I know all about the compression. There is some compression there, but if you set it to high quality, your file sizes will be 1/10 the size of a TIFF file generally, and still very good quality, very good prints, and I think it's a good solution.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, Anita asked about recommending for outsourcing. She lives in the Bay Area. So I'm going to put a link in the chat pod on the right that you can check out.
Right.
This is to the photomanagers.com. This is an organization that I'm a part of, and we have members all around the country and all around the world. If you want somebody to help you with this, so that's the photomanagers.com. I don't know if that's coming through in the chat pod, but that's the link. So you could check that out and probably find a local help. And then maybe one last question I'm seeing about backup. So I know we talked about scanning, but this is a big project. You're going to spend a ton of time on it. And my encouragement to you would be make sure you back it up, because I don't want you to lose this by accident. So as you work, keep it backed up, at least on an external hard drive, maybe on a cloud service like Backblaze, but keep that backed up as you go. So if anything happens, it's annoying, but you don't lose anything.
Right. Great point. Yeah, we definitely do not want to lose all your efforts, not just get low quality scans, but losing them. I don't think there could be anything worse than that.
Yeah. So it looks like we hit a ton of questions. Is there any other loose ends?
No, this is great. I mean, there's a lot of questions. If you want to run through again, like we did last time, and answer any of those after, you're welcome. To do that.
I'll do
this has been so helpful. Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here again.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, can I mention one thing about my website briefly?
Yes, you need to let us know where to find you, of course.
Yeah, So during this shutdown of so many things, I decided to get on Instagram. So you can find me at chaos2, like TO, chaos to memories on Instagram. And then if the link goes through, I was going to put, I'm not sure if it's coming through, but I tried to put my website just in the chat pod on the right. If you go to chaostomemories.com/tools, what you get there's some of the resources that I make available. There's a free download of a photo management workflow guide, and there's advice in there about gathering your photos as well as the ideal resolution to scan them at. You could get that for free just as a reference. You could keep that on hand, and whether you do it or you work with somebody to have it done for you, those would be good standards to follow.
Yes, absolutely. I'll make sure that gets pushed out as well.
Cool. Well, thanks for the invite. I was happy to do this again with you.
Thank you so much. And my apologies if there's been like a lag, and maybe it's my Wi-Fi again. We're trying to get to the bottom of it. I think I may just have to get hardwired for the future.
That sounds good. Well, I'll follow up with the unanswered questions in the question pod, and I appreciate the invitation.
Thanks, Adam.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.